Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Two secret chambers have Egyptologists pretty frazzled. One of them is inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the other could be hiding the lost tomb of one of Egypt's greatest rulers. Together, we'll explore some of these chambers today, along with some other amazing archaeological discoveries. So get comfortable and let's dig in. Unlocking the Great Pyramid. A secret chamber inside the greatest pyramid in the world is big enough that it could be hiding an airplane. But how are scientists supposed to find their way into this hidden chamber? The answer might have something to do with a secret mechanism, a machine that could turn the Great Pyramid of Giza into a transformer. The new theory taking the world by storm is that near the top of the pyramid is a hidden entrance to the chamber, and it was built covertly so that nobody would ever recognize it. Massive granite blocks and cogs were put together in such a way to seal the inside of the pyramid from prying eyes. What you see when you look at the pyramid today is only an exoskeleton. I bet that's not a word that came to your mind before when thinking about pyramids. The massive blocks, some of which are allegedly as big as the Baalbek stones in Lebanon, won't budge until the mechanism is activated. Once started up like an old disused generator, the mechanism will creak to life and bam! Push the stones aside. This will reveal the tunnel into the heart of the Great Pyramid for the first time in more than 4,000 years. How exciting would that be? However, mainstream scientists aren't convinced that there is a secret mechanism in the pyramid. They think the gargantuan granite blocks are structural. Until the pyramid is removed, we won't know who's right. And I don't see anyone dismantling the pyramid anytime soon. In fact, the Egyptian government was adding stone blocks to it last time I heard, trying to make it look brand new. Anyway, the way things look right now, we might never know what is hiding in the void within one of the most incredible monuments in the world. I wasn't joking around when I said there is space big enough for an airplane inside the structure. Scientists found the hidden chamber using cosmic ray imaging. That's not a matter of speculation. The Scan Pyramids project, run by Mehdi Tayyoubi, knows the void exists beyond a shadow of a doubt. Check out this picture from Southwest News Service of the team using AR technology to study the pyramid. The void is more than 90 feet long, situated just above the Grand Gallery. Nobody knows what the purpose of the chamber is. It's not connected to any tunnels or entrances. It's a huge hollow spot that could contain anything. Anything like an alien body, a spaceship, a battery, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant. I don't know. What do you think is hiding in the chamber? Let me know in the comments below. Mind-bending Mercury. Our ancient ancestors may have been a lot more psychedelic than scientists could have ever guessed. A shocking find in Spain has revealed that art and hallucinogenic drugs have gone hand in hand for the last 5,000 years. In prehistoric Spain, some very special women dressed themselves in ceremonial gowns bedazzled in tens of thousands of beads. They stood before a crowd which pulsed with the incredible thrum of 1,000 chanting voices. Drums were beating and the air was positively electric. Then these women, these priestess oracles, inhaled some red dust. The substance that these women were inhaling is something we know today as mercury. If you've seen a lot of these videos, you'll know that mercury is one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. This mystical yet toxic substance has been found in just about every corner of the world. Found buried in Chinese tombs, hidden under Mesoamerican pyramids, and stored in vessels discovered within Egyptian burial chambers. People used to think that liquid mercury could grant immortality if consumed. More than one ancient ruler may have died from drinking too much mercury. I'm looking at you, Qin Shi Huang, first emperor of China. When the ancient oracles of prehistoric Spain inhaled the powdered mercury, also known as cinnabar, the chemical sent them into a fevered trance. They likely spasmed, went delirious, and had what you might describe as a bad trip. The women would have gotten so intoxicated by the powdered mercury that they believed themselves to be communing with the gods. I don't think there's a dispensary in North America with products strong enough to provide someone with this kind of trip. That's likely because the powder's potency came from its main component, mercury. But mercury is super toxic. The oracles didn't know that. They took this trip time and time again throughout their lives, while mercury built up inside their bones. 5,000 years later, scientists found the women's skeletons at the Copper Age site of Valencia. A quick analysis showed that their bones were practically bursting with mercury. Physician Gerald Lakin at the University of Illinois said the levels they had in their bodies were extremely high. Normally, when doing this kind of research, Gerald sees exposure levels in the nanograms. The Valencia skeletons had levels in the micrograms. The amount of mercury per gram of tissue was more than 1,000 times higher than other people who suffered mercury poisoning. By the end of their lives, these women would have been in rough shape. They likely lost all their hair and developed ghoulish rashes. Their kidneys almost definitely failed, and they likely suffered from balance issues, memory loss, and ultimately death. I think we can all agree that ingesting mercury is a bad idea. That's why in the Western world at least, mercury is all but banned in pretty much everything. But the banning of mercury is fairly new. For the last 10,000 years at least, people across the globe treated mercury like a miracle, using it in everything from rituals to paintings. Who are these otherworldly beings? Thousands of years ago, ancient artists painted otherworldly beings on the rock. Their huge, bug-eyed stares have witnessed the rise and fall of every civilization in the American Southwest for the last 9,000 years. Scientists can't figure out if they represent ancient humans, prehistoric giants, or visitors from another world. The American Southwest is littered in thousands of rock art panels created by various Native American tribes. The oldest of them all are the Barrier Canyon pictographs. The art panels are most densely concentrated along rivers, and especially the confluence of the Green and Colorado rivers. The vast majority are only about 5,000 years old, but there are some that go back 4,000 years earlier. The reason I was so excited to show you these amazing rock paintings is that they look kind of like aliens, or maybe gods. That's what it all boils down to. Some of the paintings are only about 5 inches tall, looking like anthropomorphic human-animal hybrids. Others loom 8 feet tall, have bulging bug eyes, and oddly reptilian features. Not all of the pictographs here are freaky. There are many images of ducks and birds and some deer. But amidst the ordinary animals can be found painted figures with shortened arms, missing noses, and ambiguous genders. Some scientists think the paintings depict gods or ghostly ancestors or spirits. Others believe the images represent visitors from another world. The visitors may have been creatures of incredible power that revealed themselves to the ancient tribes, offered wisdom, and then departed. The paintings are extra creepy because they are the dark red color of blood. Can you guess why that is? I'll give you a hint. Blood was one of the key ingredients in the paint. The ancient artists made their pictographs by mixing blood, clay, and urine. I guess it was easier to find ingredients you could actually get from your own body. While the mystery of the otherworldly beings drifts to the back of your mind, let's open up an ancient creature and see if we can bring history to life through dissection. Secrets inside a crocodile mummy. You are going to be awestruck by what scientists found inside a mummified crocodile's belly. I know I was. Sometimes science gets messy. You have to get your hands a little dirty when digging up the past. In this case, it was scientists at the University of Manchester who got their hands dirty by opening up a 3,000-year-old crocodile. Only they got their hands metaphorically dirty. They used X-rays and CT scanning to investigate the crocodile's insides so they could preserve the creature and put it on display again later. The croc, a staggering 7.2 feet long, was being kept at the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery. It had traveled a long way from its home in ancient Egypt. If there's one thing most people don't know about Egypt that they should know, it's that they were crocodile crazy. Egyptians were cuckoo for crocodiles in the way a certain bird is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. They worshipped Sobek, the crocodile god. Egyptians also had a city dedicated to the worship of Sobek, where they specifically bred crocodiles to be sacrificed and mummified as offerings to Sobek. That city was called Fayum, home of the crocodile cult. Throughout the years, scientists have found thousands of mummified crocodiles, most of them babies, but some of them fully grown. A lot of mummified crocodiles had their internal organs removed, but not the ones who were specifically sacrificed in the name of Sobek. When scientists opened up this crocodile, they found some stones called gastroliths. These are small rocks that crocodiles swallow on purpose to help aid their digestion. It's something that creatures have been doing for millions of years, sort of natural Tums. Along with the tiny rocks was intact fish baited on a bronze hook. The time between the crocodile's last meal and its death was so short that the stones, fish, and hook hadn't reached its stomach yet. What all of this suggests is that the crocodile was fished out of a pond and immediately sacrificed. It is now some of the best proof ever that Egyptians did indeed have crocodile sacrifice farms, which in a way we still have today. But instead of honoring the crocodile, we turn them into handbags and boots. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to Jen, Bobcat, and Joshua for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button to join the Origins Explained family. The Sword of Divine Justice. Evil exists, and to fight against it, you need the right weaponry. I'm thinking you might need a giant sword specifically designed to slay demons. You might not think such a sword is out there, but one has been found. This very weapon was found in an ancient burial mound in Nara, Japan. The sword is so big that archaeologists don't think it could have been wielded in combat, at least not by any ordinary human. The iron sword is 7.5 feet long. It makes your average greatsword look like a not-so-great-sword. The weapon was found inside of a 1,600-year-old burial mound. Scientists are saying it served a ceremonial purpose and was likely intended to defend against malevolent forces in the afterlife, not in real time. If someone did use it while they were alive, they must have been a giant to carry this thing. The incredible size of the sword left archaeologist Riku Murase in disbelief when it was uncovered during excavations. The Tomio Maruyama tomb in which the sword was found dates to the 4th century AD and is known in Japan as a Kofun burial. Kofun burials are some of the most dramatic and mysterious final resting places in the world. If you haven't heard of them before, I hope this video sets you off down a rabbit hole of exploration and intrigue. These tombs are shaped like keyholes and have been a thing forever, since the 1st century AD at least. The number of Kofun burials defies all explanation. As of 2001, there were a total of 161,560 Kofun tombs. Way more than scientists can investigate. These burial mounds have been found in just about every single part of Japan, even on the remote island of Nishinoshima. Because scientists can't explore them all, many Kofun tombs remain sealed. Some of the biggest ones, the juiciest targets for archaeologists, remain sealed too. It's essentially sacrilege to excavate them. Japanese officials refuse to disturb the eternal slumber of their ancestral kings in the name of archaeology. What do you think about this? Should we respect the dead and their eternal slumber, or should we open it up to see what happened in the past? Since these tombs remain tightly shut, nobody knows what's inside of them. There could be the bodies of giants, or there could be nothing at all. Scientists say the monstrously big sword is about twice the size of any other sword ever found in Japan. Sword expert Stefan Mader said it's known as a dako sword, an oversized weapon traditionally placed in one's tomb as an offering. The dako sword was meant to fight off powerful spirits and was crafted with a wavy design to imitate the magical power of a dragon. How would you like a giant dragon sword buried alongside you? Or maybe displayed above the mantle while you're still alive? Cannibalism in the Arctic. A fateful expedition met its unfortunate end in search of the Northwest Passage. More than a century later, DNA evidence may have just proven that the doomed sailors resorted to cannibalism as they fell to the elements one by one. It's the most disturbing maritime story of our age. The HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror departed England in 1845 with high hopes. They were eager to conquer the Northwest Passage, but they didn't make it out alive. They got stuck in the ice and vanished. When the sailors didn't return home, the folk back in England feared the worst. Between 1847 and 1859, no less than 36 search expeditions went to the Arctic looking for the Terror and the Erebus. None of them found the lost boats. In fact, nobody laid eyes on those ships again until the last decade. Canadian scientists recently found both ships at the bottom of the Arctic waters. There were two men in charge of the journey. Captain James Fitzjames was the captain of the Erebus, and John Franklin had control over the Terror and the expedition as a whole. For the record, out of all the names you could give your ship going on a dangerous mission, the Terror might be the worst. James Fitzjames' body was left for more than a century alongside the skeletons of his fellow sailors on the shores of a bland Arctic island. His bones and the bones of his comrades were initially found by searchers in the 1860s. The search party heard a twisted tale from the local Inuit people. The Inuit claimed that the expedition members had turned to cannibalism in their final moments. You must be hungry, desperate, and on the edge of death to resort to eating your friends. Although I'm sure we all know that one friend in the group who would be the first one eaten. When the rumor reached England, people were in an uproar. It couldn't be true, but it was. More than 100 years later, in the 1990s, anthropologist Anne Keenleyside discovered that the bones on the Arctic island were cut as if with cooking instruments. This was the first scientific proof that the Franklin expedition broke down and ate one another. The skeletons on the island definitely belonged to the expedition's sailors, but their identities weren't confirmed until modern DNA technology was invented. And then some. In 2013, Douglas Stenton at the University of Waterloo was given permission to retrieve human remains from the site. In 2017, Douglas and his team requested DNA samples from potential relatives of the deceased. It took a long time, but there was finally a match. The first one came in 2021 when the skeleton of John Gregory was identified. John was an engineer on the Erebus, and his skull matched perfectly with one of his descendants. The most recent match is that of Captain James Fitzjames. This just happened, so it's kind of breaking news. The DNA extracted from a molar matched with one of the captain's living descendants. Now that he's been identified, scientists can safely say that Fitzjames was involved in the last horrifying days of cannibalism on the remote Arctic island. Douglas Stenton said that it was a desperate act that didn't even save them in the end, but only prolonged their suffering. Secret Nazi artifacts. Behind a bookcase in an art collector's suburban home, police uncovered a cache of Nazi memorabilia that investigators are calling the largest seizure of its kind. The suburban home in Buenos Aires, Argentina, was an illicit museum. This wasn't some World War II buff's innocent collection. These are artifacts that, although maybe historically significant, are also despicably evil. Inside this secret chamber were over 75 items. These weren't treasures that somebody purchased off eBay and had shipped to them in a discreet box. The objects are believed to have been brought to the country by Nazi officials who fled the strong arm of justice when World War II ended. The art collector knew exactly how prohibited these objects were to have. He took great measures to hide them. When police removed the bookcase, they were facing a nondescript wall. The treasure room was sealed tighter than the secret chamber in King Tut's tomb. On the other side of the wall was a door, and beyond that, the collection of Nazi relics. The operation to seize these relics was a big one. It took teamwork from the local police in Buenos Aires, Interpol, and federal investigators to pull off. Argentine Security Minister Patricia Bullrich told reporters that some of the items were discovered with photographs of Adolf Hitler holding the actual items. These were objects that may have belonged to Hitler himself, the big bad boogeyman of the 20th century. Fair warning, some of these items might make you feel uncomfortable. For example, the children's toys emblazoned with swastikas and Nazi symbols, such as the harmonicas designed for use in the indoctrination of children into the Nazi cult. Police also found artifacts that were used by the Nazi regime's eugenics program. One of the ways Nazis demonstrated their racial superiority was by measuring human heads. It was pseudo-scientific nonsense. The tool used to measure heads was found in this collection, and it may have been used. The one object police are convinced was definitely owned by Hitler was a magnifying glass. Photo negatives show Hitler using the exact same glass. But does this mean that Hitler escaped World War II unscathed and fled to Argentina? There have been rumors about it ever since the end of the war. Perhaps the owner of the property knows something that the rest of us don't. But here's the weird thing about that. He was not arrested, and his name has not been released. The objects have been confiscated, but the collector appears to be under special protection. Should there be consequences for collecting such items? Let me know what you think in the comments. The secret door. There is still more to be found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. A secret door may lead to a completely different ancient leader's tomb. Tutankhamun may have been put in his burial chamber as a distraction, keeping tomb raiders from discovering the true owner of the tomb. This might just be the greatest discovery in Egypt of this millennium. Nicholas Reeves at the University of Arizona said he found a sealed door in King Tut's tomb. Nicholas thinks the door leads to the hidden burial chamber of the famously beautiful Queen Nefertiti. Nicholas's discovery is thanks to some amazing high-resolution scans that were taken of King Tut's tomb. The scans revealed a pair of false walls. These were doorways that had been bricked up and then sealed behind painted walls. Nicholas called them ghost doorways. He speculated that the original owner of the tomb was buried behind one of the ghost doorways. Then it was sealed behind a trick wall, and King Tut was buried in the antechamber, making the whole thing appear to be his tomb. Archaeologists have been playing checkers, but the ancient tomb builders were playing chess all along. This might have been the biggest fake-out of the last 3,000 years. It's almost like the tomb builders knew that Howard Carter was going to discover the tomb in 1922, so they took measures to prevent modern scientists from getting to the real prize, Nefertiti. Of course, none of this makes sense unless you know why King Tut's tomb could truly belong to Nefertiti. It all has to do with the legendary pharaoh's parents. Egyptologists can't agree on who King Tut's mom and dad were, but they have their theories. The most popular theory is that his father was Pharaoh Akhenaten, and his mother was Queen Nefertiti. Also, you might like to know that his mom and dad were brother and sister, which could explain why King Tut suffered from genetic issues that helped hasten his demise by the age of 19. All of this begs the question, how powerful was Nefertiti before her death around 1330 BC? Archaeologists can't say, but that shouldn't come as a surprise to you. They don't even know how long she was alive. Some experts believe Nefertiti ruled as queen regent while King Tut was on the throne. Tut was the puppet and Nefertiti was the puppet master. Other experts like Joyce Tildesley at the University of Manchester think Nefertiti died during the reign of her husband Akhenaten, before King Tut ever came to power. Whichever way you slice it, Nefertiti is a total mystery. Historical records suggest her beauty was unparalleled in the ancient world. She was mighty, smart, and her tomb has never been discovered. Nefertiti's final resting place is an unsolved mystery, up there with the lost tombs of Cleopatra, Alexander the Great, and Genghis Khan. Now, scientists have to figure out how they're going to breach the so-called ghost doorway in King Tut's tomb. When more information comes out, I'll be sure to let you know. Hunting giant armadillos. A new study may have pinpointed exactly when humans arrived in Argentina and what they ate to survive. The creature they gravitated to for sustenance is something that doesn't even exist anymore. Have you ever seen an armadillo in real life? They're pretty cool and adorable too. Many years ago, before the end of the Ice Age, there were giant armadillos roaming the Americas. They were just like the ones you might have seen scurrying across the road at night, only humongous. really humongous, up to 660 pounds. Miguel Delgado at the National University of La Plata said giant armadillos had an incredible amount of muscle on them. Ancient hunters likely targeted the creatures because they were like slow-moving buffets. The new study isn't just about food and survival, it's about human history. Scientists are still struggling to understand when human beings arrived in the Americas. What scientists found in the Pampean region of Argentina is changing the narrative. Here are some facts. Starting 129,000 years ago, things got dangerously cold on our beloved planet. Ice sheets covered a large portion of Earth, with the cold spell peaking during what scientists call the last glacial maximum. That was 26,000 years ago. Things were colder than anyone alive today can imagine. Then things started to warm up a bit. The sun came out and the temperature skyrocketed. By 11,700 years ago, the Ice Age was at an end. As the age of glaciers reached its conclusion, scientists think the first humans started journeying across Siberia and into Alaska over a land bridge. The ice was still so thick that the Bering Strait was frozen, allowing people to migrate into a whole new world. Now cue the Aladdin music. Not all scientists are convinced that this is what happened though, especially now that the butchered bones of giant armadillos have been found in Argentina. The bones are about 21,000 years old. They also show clear evidence of being processed by humans. This means that people were already in Argentina 20,000 years ago. They were butchering these armadillos, or scientifically called glyptodonts, during the last glacial maximum. And if you look at a map, you'll notice that Argentina is a long way from Siberia. It's highly unlikely that these ancient humans migrated across a land bridge and then made a beeline for the bottom of the world. Knowing all this information, how do you think humans got to Argentina? Did they take ships from Asia? Were they the survivors of an apocalyptic disaster? Or were they already there? I'll leave you to ponder the origin of humanity, but don't go anywhere yet, because I want to tell you about a very angry elderly couple who were tricked into giving up an ancient artifact worth millions. This mask is worth millions. How would you feel if you were cheated out of $4.4 million? You'd be about as angry as the couple who recently accused an antiquities dealer of doing just that. When I tell you how much the antiquities dealer paid the couple for their ancient artifact, you're going to be shocked. This legal case is currently making its way through the French court system. It began with an elderly couple in their 80s clearing out their home. Most of the stuff in their old house went to a garage sale. Who doesn't love a good garage sale? There was one object in particular that the couple didn't want to sell to a stranger on the street, and this object was an African mask, a very rare piece from the Fang people of Gabon. In fact, the mask is from one of very few known African secret societies. I'll tell you about that in a minute, but first, check out this image of a similar artifact thanks to Pascal Guyot. It's a pretty awesome mask, right? The couple went to a local antiquities dealer who was happy to pay them for the piece. The dealer paid $157 for the mask. They would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for the meddling newspaper. Months after the sale, the couple were reading a newspaper when they saw something that made their blood boil. The same mask they sold to the antiquities dealer had just sold at a specialized auction for $4.4 million. The dealer wasted no time in setting up the object at an auction. This wasn't a case of the dealer realizing that the mask was worth a fortune later on. They knew when paying the measly $157 that they had stumbled upon a gold mine. Everything about this dealer sounds sleazy. They did not display the mask at their shop after buying it. Instead, they immediately contacted two different auction houses. The auctioneers for both houses gave poor evaluations. Not convinced, the dealer went to a third organization, one that specializes in African objects. The dealer ordered an analysis of carbon-14 dating and mass spectrometry. Sure enough, the mask came from the 19th century. An ethnologist revealed that it was used in purification rites by a secret society that operated inside Gabon's Fang ethnic group. These are not the kinds of things that you do on a hunch. If the dealer was just curious, they wouldn't have spoken to so many auction houses and ordered scientific tests. They would have put the mask in the window and sold it to somebody. The auction house put an estimate of about $6 $600,000 on the mask, but it sold for far more in 2022. Not to worry, justice is being served. The couple launched a lawsuit against the antiquities dealer who they say cheated them. The proceeds of the sale have already been frozen. The couple's lawyer is fighting for their right to cancel the original sale since they had been duped, believing the mask was worthless. The dealer knew he had done wrong. He already tried to settle out of court for about $300,000, but the couple is too furious to give in that easily. As for the mask, it was worn by members of the Nagil Society, a group who acted as the police and judges of the Fang tribe. Their members were tasked with tracking down sorcerers and handing down their sentences, which was usually death. The Nagil Society hasn't been around in more than 100 years, making the few masks that remain highly valuable, especially in France, where they outlawed the Nagil Society in 1910 after a series of ritual murders were carried out.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Pet Cemetery. The world's oldest known pet cemetery is located in the Roman port city of Berenice, and it shows that the ancients treated their animals well, at least here, according to a newly published study, which claims that people tended to their injured pets carefully and even fed special food to critters who had lost their teeth. The analysis of the remains of 585 companion animals shows that they were laid to rest in individual burials with grave goods and collars, with many being covered in textiles or pottery. Surprisingly, only 5% of the burials are made up of dogs, while 90% were cats, many of which were found wearing iron collars or glass and shell necklaces. While dogs comprise a stark minority of the cemetery's inhabitants, evidence shows that they were treated equally well by their guardians during their lifetimes. The dogs lived a long time, often suffering from ailments that would have made survival on their own impossible, including gum disease, joint issues, and injuries incurred long before death. Dating back to the 1st and 2nd centuries, the cemetery was discovered beneath a Roman garbage dump just outside the city's walls. When the site's first study was published in 2016, many experts reportedly wondered whether the graves actually constitute a pet cemetery or if they were simply the discarded remains of animals who didn't mean much to their owners. The new findings shed unprecedented light on the relationship between humans and animals in ancient Egypt, which includes monkeys in addition to cats and dogs. Monkeys were buried with just as much care and consideration as their feline and canine counterparts, with grave goods and at least one specimen wrapped in a woolen blanket. These burials are distinct from other ancient graveyards, showing that they had special meaning to the people who put them there and filling a crucial gap in our understanding of our relationship with not only our best friend, but other creatures as well. Mud mummy. A study published in February of this year reveals the unexpected discovery of a so-called mud mummy, suggesting that encasing deceased individuals in mud was a money-saving method of preparing people of lower societal ranking for the afterlife. Mummification was an expensive and long process that typically involved imported materials, and not everyone could afford it. This new discovery indicates that cheaper, locally sourced alternatives were available, like mud. The mummy, which dates back to around 1207 BC, was donated to the University of Sydney in 1860, and the sarcophagus it came in, which dates back to around 1000 BC, does not belong to the same person. According to the researchers, antiquities traders likely placed a mummified body into an unrelated coffin in an attempt to sell a more complete set. That was popular back in the day, and it apparently worked. While it's the only known mummy to be encased in mud, the discovery testifies to mummification being a custom among all social classes, with people of lesser means improvising through the use of alternative materials. A new queen. While excavating at the vast necropolis of Saqqara in January, archaeologists discovered the 4,200-year-old tomb of a previously unknown Egyptian queen. Found near the pyramid of King Teti, who was only known to have 2 wives named Iput I and Kuit II, the funerary temple belonged to a woman named Queen Nate. Inscriptions on the wall identify her as Teti's wife and daughter. Archaeologist Zahi Hawass is heading the excavations at Saqqara and told the press that the team had discovered a pyramid dedicated to Nate nearby back in 2010, but they did not know who it belonged to until they found her funerary temple. Only 30% of Saqqara's contents have been excavated, while most of the sprawling site remains buried, so there is a lot there still to be found. The project that found Queen Nate's tomb was jointly undertaken by the Zahi Hawass Center of Egyptology and Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, or the SCA. Discoveries like this are rewriting ancient Egypt's history, especially when it comes to the 18th and 19th dynasties of the New Kingdom, which was when King Teti ruled. In addition to Queen Nate's funerary chamber, the team found an array of artifacts dating back roughly 3,000 years to the New Kingdom, including dozens of mummies, figurines, pottery, and 54 colorfully decorated coffins. SCA chief Mostafa Waziri said that the discovery of wooden coffins from the New Kingdom is a first at Saqqara. The sheer amount of new findings being made here reminds us of how little we truly know about ancient Egypt and how much is waiting to be uncovered. Dozens of tombs. It may not seem rare to discover an ancient Egyptian tomb, especially with the sheer number of them that have made headlines in recent years. But each burial tells a story unique to the person inside and the time period in which they lived. They help experts piece together a more complete picture of Egypt's history. In April, archaeologists announced the discovery of 110 ancient Egyptian tombs spanning 3 periods of history, including before the pyramids were built, in the Qam al-Khalejan area along the Nile Delta, around 93 miles northeast of Cairo. 68 of the burials date back to around 3,300 BC, during the late pre-dynastic period, when the Nile Valley was still separated into Upper and Lower Egypt. These oval-shaped graves appear to be connected with the pre-dynastic Buto culture, with most of the deceased laid to rest in a squatting position with their head facing west. The team also found a baby buried in a jar, which was a relatively common but not very well understood custom, according to archaeologist Ayman Ashmawi. 5 tombs are from a time known as the Naqada III culture, during the decades leading up to Egypt's unification in 3000 BC. The rest of the graves are from between 1782 and 1750 BC, which was an intermediary period between the Middle and New Kingdoms. It was during this time that the controversial Hyksos dynasty ruled for over a century. Speaking with Smithsonian Magazine, Egyptologist Salima Ikram described the cemetery as extremely interesting because it contains burials from some of Egypt's earliest periods, as well as the time of the Hyksos. She explained that experts are still trying to understand how the Hyksos and the Egyptians coexisted and to what degree the former took on Egyptian traditions. Spelling mistakes. An ancient Egyptian writing board dating back to sometime between 1981 and 1802 BC during the Middle Kingdom period proves that correcting students' work is an educational tradition dating back thousands of years. Now in the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, it was once used by scribes for practicing their penmanship as they copied texts. Scribes were entrusted with highly important tasks, including extensive and accurate record-keeping and correspondence. For this reason, they began their training during childhood, learning how to compose letters, wills, and tax forms and hieroglyphics under a master scribe. The writing board reflects a simplified cursive style of hieroglyphics that was developed around 3000 BC as a way to expedite the laborious process of composing administrative and religious documents. Do you remember the feeling from school? Did you have to learn how to write in cursive? See, times haven't changed that much. Used by a student named Inwai Su, it contains correspondence written to the scholar's brother, Pe Nai Su. Ancient depictions show scribes sitting on the ground holding tablets similar to the one Inwai Su used. These writing boards were used and reused over and over, and in this particular example, and many others, the master scribe's corrections appear in red ink, much like those of a modern teacher. How is this still the same? Fascinating finds like this reflect the foundations of written communication, bringing us to a time around 4,000 years ago, when a young student's skills were put to the test in strikingly similar ways that they are today. A pregnant mummy. While examining what they thought was the mummy of an ancient Egyptian priest named Hor Jehuti, a team of experts got quite the shock. They put the coffin through a scan and noticed some tiny foot bones in the individual's abdomen. Further analysis confirmed that the mummy contained the remains of a fetus. Ergo, not a male priest, that's for sure. It's the first known example of a deliberately mummified pregnant woman, begging the questions of who she was, why she and her unborn baby were mummified, and why the fetus was not removed from her body prior to the mummification process. Scientists appropriately named her the Mysterious Lady of the National Museum of Warsaw. Donated to the University of Warsaw in 1826, The sarcophagus and mummy, which were allegedly found in Thebes, were thought to be female until the coffin's inscriptions were translated in 1920, suggesting that it contained a male specimen. Scientists got their first credible inklings that the mummy is female in 2016, when computer tomography revealed a delicate bone structure and missing male organs. While the sarcophagus was indeed made for a male mummy, it somehow ended up being a vessel for a pregnant woman. This is likely due to rampant 19th century looting, which often saw mix-up between mummies and their coffins. Unfortunately, as a result, researchers may never know who the woman was, where she came from, or why she seems to be an exception to traditional burial customs. A brewery. We humans have always wanted an excuse to let loose and relax every once in a while, and of course, ancient people were no different, as the discovery of the world's oldest industrial-scale brewery proves. Found earlier this year at a funerary site in North Abydos, the production facility dates back over 5,000 years, long before the pyramids were built. The brewery was likely built around 3150 BC, during the reign of King Narmer. The site consists of 8 large beer production areas with around 40 earthenware pots in each. These vessels, which were held in place by clay levers, were used for heating grains and water. Evidence suggests that the beer played a role in sacrificial rites, and that the brewery may have even been built solely for supplying royal rituals, according to a statement from Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. Lead archaeologist Ahmed Shawkat revealed that the site was first explored over a century ago by British archaeologist T. Eric Peat, who believed he had found equipment for drying grain and protecting it against rot. A fresh look after its rediscovery in 2018 suggests, however, that these implements were used for making beer, and that the facility was capable of producing 5,900 gallons at a time, enough for every person in a 40,000-seat stadium to have a pint, as archaeologist Matthew Adams pointed out. This site also speaks to the abundant wealth during the Pharaonic period, during which time Narmer is said to have united Upper and Lower Egypt. Hundreds of tombs. Archaeologists have just discovered around 250 rock-cut tombs dating back to different periods in the Old Kingdom and the Ptolemaic dynasty in the Upper Egyptian province of Sohag. The Old Kingdom burials date back between roughly 2700 and 2200 BC, according to Mustafa Waziri, the Secretary General of the SCA, and they are encompassed by an entrance leading to a burial room and a well. One such tomb bears faint remains of hieroglyphics identifying it as a sacrificial chamber. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which lasted around 300 years, ended around 30 BC with the death of Cleopatra. In addition to actual human remains, the team found an array of artifacts dedicated to ancient Egyptian deities, including pottery and votive objects, animal bones, and limestone remnants that could be funerary plates dating as far back as the 6th dynasty. This is one of several recent discoveries that the Egyptian government hopes will revive its ailing tourism industry in the aftermath of a 2011 political uprising and amid the ongoing global coronavirus pandemic. Church and temple. Earlier this year, archaeologists announced the discovery of the remnants of a Ptolemaic-era temple, a Roman fort, and an early Coptic church at the Shiha Fort archaeological site in Aswan, all together. Dating back to the Ptolemaic dynasty, which began roughly 20 years after Alexander's death in 323 BC and lasted until around 30 BC, the temple ruins were decorated with a partially complete sandstone panel featuring a Roman emperor standing next to an altar featuring an unknown deity. The panel, although incomplete, clearly marks the temple's entrance. These recent findings build upon the original excavations carried out by German archaeologist Hermann Juncker from 1920 to 1922. The Coptic church that once stood at the site had a red brick vault, and the building was surrounded by a mud brick wall measuring nearly 7 feet wide. There are 4 rooms on the northern side of the church, along with a long hallway and a staircase. Kilns that were once used for baking pottery were found on the structure's south side, and its eastern side contains stone tiles. These findings are just the beginning of what the site has to offer in a historical context, and more is surely to come upon further analysis. You know it. A huge lost city. Archaeologists were stunned earlier this year when they discovered ancient Egypt's largest known city to date. Known as the Rise of Aten, the lost metropolis dates back roughly 3,400 years to the reign of Amenhotep III, and was found buried beneath the sand on the western bank of Luxor. It is the greatest discovery since King Tut's tomb was found in the 20s. More information about the city is slowly coming to light. Archaeologists were actually looking for Tutankhamun's mortuary temple, but found this whole city instead. World-famous Egyptologist Zahi Hawass said in a statement that the ruins are remarkably intact. There are remains of houses with walls up to 10 feet high, lining organized streets. And ordinary, everyday objects like rings, pottery vessels, pots for carrying meat, and spinning and weaving tools sit inside the rooms, as if everyone just up and left, leaving everything abandoned just like someone left there yesterday. Except it wasn't yesterday, it was thousands of years ago. There are workshops, including one that was used for manufacturing mud bricks, as well as production facilities, housing, metal making and glass making equipment, molds for making amulets, and more. There was also a bakery containing ovens and large pottery, showing that it was probably the most popular bakery in town, and it made bread for a large number of people. The size of the city was huge, and it probably served as a precedent for the city of Aten. The city was alive and thriving under the reign of King Amenhotep III and his son Akhenaten, who was co-ruler. The rise of Aten is not without a handful of unusual discoveries, including the strange burial of a skeleton with outstretched arms and rope wrapped around the knees. We still don't know why this lost city was abandoned, but it looks like everyone left and resettled in Armana for unknown reasons. Archaeologists are working hard to figure it out. They have their work cut out for them. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite discovery? The lost city is hard to beat. What do you want to learn more about? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!